Welcome to our ninth annual Team 55 Let's Tackle Suicide Awareness Friday Night Lights event. We've been doing this now for 8 years, although this is the ninth annual. The three pillars that we continue to provide as the strength of our Team 55 Friday Night Lights events are number one, showcasing our high school athletes playing the games that they love. Fundraising to support our assertive outreach for suicide prevention program in collaboration with the CMHA, and bringing a new message to you each year to assist you in maintaining and strengthening your mental wellness. Since our inaugural event back in 2013, we've made a tradition of inviting celebrity guests from around Ontario to help us out down at the Thomas A. Stewart football field. And this year, although we can't meet live on the field due to continued COVID restrictions and some logistical issues, we are very lucky that your TV and Ashburnham Realty, our presenting sponsor, has been able to assist us in presenting our message to you through your TV and computer. And tonight, I am very pleased to be joined by two very special guests, both well-known Canadians. Tara Slone and Brad Sinopoli join us tonight. Thanks to both of you for participating in our Team 55 Friday Night Lights event.
Super, super happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Likewise.
So Tara, let's start with you. Firstly, how are you, and how have you and your family navigated throughout the last 18 months of the pandemic?
Whew. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, this is interesting timing because we're talking, just as my season is ramping up, and I have to say the summer was a really welcome break for me because I have a 12-year-old last year who was in grade 6 and home for most of the year. So we were, using this shared space for my work and her school, and I have to say it was really hard. There was just a sense of claustrophobia. As lucky as we are to have a home and a roof over our heads and food on the table, it was really, really challenging. And I found myself to be stretched and at the end of my rope a lot. So the summer was a bit of a welcome break from that. But now, as I gear up towards the new hometown hockey season and do more stuff like this, and I'm going to be out in the world a lot more, I feel it creeping back in. So it is interesting to have this chat right now. But the short answer is I'm doing fine, but monitoring my own mental health very closely.
So you were born in Montreal. You grew up in the East Coast. You worked and lived in the West for a while, and now you call Toronto your home with your husband and your young daughter. Throughout this life coverage of the country, so to speak, you were raised in a Buddhist home, practicing meditation, schooled in the arts of theater and music, which led to a rock music career. And then to top it all off, you've added to your resume an accomplished broadcaster, now co-hosting Rogers Hometown Hockey with Ron McLean, amongst other programs. I'd like you to take our audience on a quick journey of how one achieves all these various successes along the way.
Clearly, my trajectory has been a winding one, and it hasn't been a fast route to anything. But I think it's part luck and part willingness to jump into new things. Music was my first love, so it was opera that was my original passion. I studied that for a while and then ended up, joining a rock band. And that kind of swept me up. I didn't really have aspirations of becoming a rock star, even though I love rock music and rock singing. I ended up joining a band called Joy Drop. We had a couple of albums that did pretty well in North America. I was also a contestant on a show called Rockstar in Excess. But sometimes you have to make decisions. And for me, it was becoming increasingly difficult to be on the road in a rock band, to make money as a musician. Any artist knows that. And so I had to take a look at what my skill sets were. And I decided TV would be a natural next step. And I threw my hat into the ring. And actually, the person who helped me get my foot in the door and helped me make my first demo reel was Michael Landsberg. So we all know Michael and the incredible work he does in the area of mental health. So I got a job at a small station. I learned on the fly, and then I got a job hosting a morning show in Calgary, which is how I know who Brad is from his days as a Calgary Stampeder. And then I was also lucky enough to land a job with Sportsnet and co-hosting Rogers Hometown Hockey. So I didn't really have a plan B at any point in my life, but I had to take some big leaps.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Michael Landsberg, because that's how we got introduced, of course. And I'm curious about the opera. So hang on to the thought of the opera, and we'll get back to that. Brad, how about you? You and your wife brought a son into the world, I think, right in the midst of the pandemic. And while you were losing a season of your career with no CFL play, how have you managed life through these crazy times?
Yeah, not the best planning on our part. But the timing of everything was interesting, I guess, to say the least. Right? I think that was, now I'm thinking 3 weeks before training camp, our son was born. We were gearing up for a season. And just as the pandemic was starting, we kind of knew that things were maybe going to be a little bit different. I remember going in about a week before he was born, and the hospital started having all these different scenarios. If this gets worse, they were kind of updating everything by the hour. So I think at that time they said, we're not sure if you can be in the room for when the baby's born. And we kind of were realizing this thing was getting a little bit worse, I guess you could say. I started thinking about football at the same time. Is training camp going to be delayed? Is this going to affect anything we're doing? And then all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 days later, everything had changed completely, and all these protocols were in place at the hospital, and we were fully into the pandemic. Our baby was born, and from there it was a lot of window visits. I guess similar to what everyone was going through. Just the only difference was that we had a newborn, and we were kind of just left for me and my wife to kind of figure it out, which I think was a kind of a blessing in disguise. It was very interesting, to just be us two, which I think usually, you don't really spend a year together with the baby, just you doing everything, for the most part, obviously, trying to keep everyone safe and the baby. So it was interesting. It was challenging at times, feeling like you were kind of stuck indoors. At the same time, I was, football was on the back burner. The season was being pushed back and then eventually canceled. And, I always said it was good. The pandemic took something away in terms of football. It also gave us our son and this incredible amount of time we got to spend with him. But it also gave me some time to think, I think, and put things in perspective, I would say, at the right time in my life, in terms of being an athlete and trying to look ahead, and maybe my time was coming to an end. So yeah, a lot of different things happened within the year and a half, and now looking back, just a whirlwind, I'm sure, for everyone, but at least for me, it was a lot of good, a lot of interesting, and some things coming to an end, but it all worked out, I think, for the best.
And listening to that, it may be a blessing in disguise, because not everyone gets to spend that kind of time with their newborn when they're off working with their careers, and so, as you say, when you look back, it was a good thing. Now, you were born and raised in Peterborough, right here. You went to school at Crestwood, and that's where you started your high school career. You're an accomplished athlete. Some people might not know that you were a AAA minor hockey player here in Peterborough as well. From Crestwood, you go on to play football with the Ottawa Gee-Gees at the University of Ottawa, and not just play. You just happen to win the Heck Crichton Trophy as Canada's top football player, and then establish yourself as one of the greatest receivers to play in the CFL, just all in a day's work, winning 2 outstanding Canadian Player Awards and a couple of Grey Cups along the way, one with Calgary and of course with Ottawa Red Blacks in 2016. So all of us in Peterborough who watch you with pride, being from the patch, as we say. Tell us in your own words about that ride and maybe some of the ups and downs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I kind of had a mentality, a bit of a yo-yo. I think my whole athletic career, in terms of in my own head, I had this confidence. I think from you know, I always played scenarios over and over in my head, whether it was scoring a game-winning goal, in the Stanley Cup, or hitting this last-second shot. As a kid, I had all these dreams. Throwing a Hail Mary pass. I was a big fan of Doug Flutie growing up. So, I always had this confidence when I played, but then at the same time, I had almost this weird anxiousness that I wasn't good enough, that everything I was doing was just not as good as everyone else who I was playing with. And that was kind of the story of what I at least battled from high school football all the way up until I retired. Football is a very interesting sport. It's you never reach perfection. You always are trying to reach perfection. We watch so much film. We go over every single step that you do. Every inch matters. And no matter how hard you try, you're never going to achieve it. And I think that's the great thing about football, is that you're always working to get better. There's always something to get better at. And in saying that, at least for me, it was always just a balance of finding my own comfort in terms of what I was capable of, what I can do, and a reality check of how I look at myself. Maybe I'm not as bad as what I feel, which is a weird thing to say, but I always was just worried. Just make the next catch. Especially when I made the switch. Just make the next catch. Just make the next throw. And that was kind of the mantra I went on with. And I always used to joke with guys in university. Do you know how hard it is to complete a pass, just one pass? I always used to say that to the receivers, and you go on, you do like 20 or 30 a game or whatever, and it's no big deal. But in your own head, there's always this battle that was going on for each individual play, and I think that was maybe the appealing thing for me, at least. At least it kind of kept a chip on my shoulder all the way through the years in football.
Well, and you make a good point. We're our own worst critics, and we're toughest on ourselves. And we'll come back to that. Tara, I wanted to circle back. My wife and I are we're big fans of the reality rock show, Rockstar in Excess, when you were one of two Canadian contestants on that, I believe back in 2005. And but you were a rock star long before that, being lead singer of the band Joy Drop, a Juno-nominated band, I might add. But you mentioned about opera. How does one move from opera to a rock star?
It's not as much of a leap as you would think. I mean, that was just, I love all music. So when I was growing up, I loved classical music, and that's kind of the style that I felt like my voice lent itself to. So I loved singing in choirs, and I just had that kind of voice. I actually didn't think I could sing pop music, even though I worked in a record store all through high school, and I was a huge rock music fan. I loved indie rock. And I was super into the grunge era. But for me, I really didn't have the discipline to continue with opera past a certain point. In high school, I was a big fish in a small pond. And then you get to the university level where people are specializing in this. And if you're not spending 2 or 3 hours a day in a practice room, really, working on your instrument, you're not going to succeed. And I just did not have the discipline. And it is one of the regrets of my life, that I didn't follow through. Although I'm in a good place now. I always wonder what would have happened if I'd continued with that path. But I loved rock music too. My dad is a singer and a songwriter and a lawyer. So when I went to Montreal to go to theater school, I looked for some musical companions and just tried my hand or my vocal cords at doing rock music. And lo and behold, I could do it. But I had to train some things out of myself. I mean, for the musicians out there, they'll understand what I'm saying. When I had too much vibrato in my voice when I was doing rock music, so I actually had to kind of, trained some of the good habits out of me.
Well, I think many would agree. The pivot worked, and you've been successful at it. Speaking of pivoting in your career, Brad, you grew up as a quarterback at high school, and of course, set records in Ottawa for yards thrown and touchdowns. You get drafted into the CFL 29th overall as a QB, and then immediately you start to transition into the wide receiver position, which I think blows a lot of people's mind. Clearly, this takes pure athletic talent, but tell us about the challenges of this kind of a change in such a competitive sport where these positions are entirely different, and the resilience and discipline it takes to take on these challenges.
Well, first I'll say it takes a lot of luck. I was very fortunate in terms of just the scenario that kind of aligned itself at the right time. I was able to take advantage of the opportunity, and it was a real challenge. My whole life, my whole football life, I wanted to be a quarterback in the CFL. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Even pre-draft, there was talks about, would you have interest switching over? If you want to make a living, you have to switch over. I was not entertaining any of that whatsoever. Despite maybe what I said eventually after the fact, I just love the sport and I just want to keep playing. In my mind, it was almost like the end for me. And when the switch happened, it was difficult. I found quarterback very tough. I had a lot of anxiety about going into the huddle, telling people what to do, being this voice, this confident leader that you need to be, especially at the professional level. It was so challenging as a quarterback, all that other stuff. I had to really, every single time I stepped in the huddle, every time there was a meeting, you had to speak up. I really had to push through that. And when the switch happened, all of a sudden, at least though, as a quarterback, you fall back on what you know, and that I can throw the ball, I can play, and you have that confidence there. All of a sudden, I felt just alone on this island of I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never felt this physically before. You're so used to being in this pocket as a quarterback. Next thing you know, you're just out there on your own. All the spacing was different. All the little intricate things that you have to do that guys have been doing their whole life. I'm going up against guys from the States that have been doing this since they were 5 years old. And, we were playing hockey since I was 5 years old. So had to be a quick learning curve for me. I think the one thing I always just tried to focus on was if I just go out and I try to work as hard as I can and I try to learn as much as I can. I spent countless hours and time going over every single scenario that would happen on just a single route. So that when I went out there, at least I knew what my options were. And if I couldn't do it physically, then I was going to go out and work until I could get the steps down or until I could make the moves and do whatever I needed to do. But the idea was to be so prepared that no matter what scenario came up, I at least had an answer, or at least I knew I should have done that. So I think that kind of helped at least limp along enough and stick around enough to eventually just be on the team and keep earning your spot week in, week out. And was great. Like I said, I was lucky with the scenario. I had the right people around me, the right opportunity, and just kind of took advantage of it. And, that opportunity doesn't come around for everyone. I would say that I am very lucky for that.
Well, you talk about luck, you might be a little humble there, but determination and preparedness is a great message. And I think it all worked out for you at wide receiver. So it's incredible how both of you, your different careers really are following similar paths with your pivoting change and how you've approached those and how you're successful in making those changes. Tara, one of your latest successes is your new interview series on Sportsnet called Top of Her Game. It's a program that highlights female athletes, builders, rising stars that inspire people. And your guests have included the likes of Juanique Horn-Miller, the first Mohawk woman to compete in the Summer Olympics, Chantal Petitclerc, Canada's most decorated Paralympian, Manon Rhéaume, Kia Nurse, Tessa Virtue. The list goes on. But the episode that for me personally I found most riveting was with Morgan Urso. And people watching right now are going to say, well, who's Morgan Urso? She's a young high school hockey player from Illinois who was ousted from her Team Illinois hockey program due to her struggles with mental health. I can't get my head wrapped around that this is a story from 2020, 2021. It just doesn't make sense to me. But can you tell us a bit about that story and why it was so important for you to tell the world about it?
Well, I got to tell you, there are a lot of stories right now. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening in 2021, and that certainly was one of them. I'll give credit where credit is due in that, hometown hockey has provided a platform, and we have such a great team, and we have been able to focus on things that I don't think a lot of typical hockey or sports broadcasts have been able to focus on, and inclusivity is a mantra for us, and touching on mental health, people like Clint Malarchuk, Sheldon Kennedy. So we've been able to have those conversations. And Top of Her Game is it's a little bit of an extension of that, and it arose during the pandemic when all live sports came to a halt. And I'd like to say it took a pandemic to get a female focused series off the ground, but it's kind of true. But it was meant to be 6 episodes, and it turned into like 48. And God willing, it all continues. And yeah, we had some big stars on, but when I heard Morgan's story, it was Emily Kaplan from ESPN who wrote the article. And like you, I couldn't believe that this was happening. I mean, the unjustness of it. This young, eager, wonderful hockey player who wanted to play the game but was suffering from mental illness was not allowed to play because nobody knew what to do or how to handle what she was going through. Part of it is I saw a little bit of myself in her in a way. I mean, I didn't have an awareness of mental illness when I was her age. I had my first what I recognized as a panic attack in 2007 when I first started doing live TV. Um, but I realized at that time that I'd been suffering from panic attacks my whole life. And even in 2007, which wasn't that long ago, I mean, the conversations weren't happening. And so I just wanted to highlight Morgan's story. First of all, I think she's incredibly brave, and the conversation needs to continue. And yes, the stigma has been alleviated to some extent, but not nearly enough. We know the stats. I mean, look around a table. It's one in four of us has some sort of mental health issue. And so I think the more we discuss it and the more, uh, we have to talk about it in terms of everyone. And so this young woman was very brave in coming forward, and I wanted to help her amplify her story. And so did Robin Leonard, the goaltender. I think it's turned out well for her, but it doesn't turn out well for everybody, as we know. So we just have to keep talking about it. We have to keep the messaging alive. And for me, it's important for me to also talk about my own mental health journey, because I think the more that people hear, oh, you've gone through that as well. Okay, well, I can talk about it now. I'm not doing so well today. I think that's helpful.
Well, it's an incredible story for anybody to see. So I encourage folks watching tonight to Google Top of Her Game, Morgan Urso story. Thank you for sharing that story with us. Brad, you had 9 successful seasons in the CFL, arguably the most grueling sport, contact sport there is. So I'm pretty sure your body endured a number of hits, a number of heavy blows, probably some debilitating injuries and even concussions. While dealing with those physical setbacks, costing you time playing the sport that you love, does that wane on your mental health? And if so, how did you deal with the mental strain that was caused by the physical injuries?
Yeah, it's very interesting. As fans and as a player, the physical injuries usually are defined by days or weeks missed when you have an injury. I had a lot of injuries and had some surgeries and whatnot, and um, you know, mentally, uh, that extends far beyond, I think, what the weeks or the days are that you're supposed to miss when you have an injury. 2 weeks is physical, um, but the mental strain never really goes away. There's always questions of, is it going to come back the same? Are you going to be the same player? It's hard not to think about, especially when it's a little bit of a bigger injury, about the impact and all of that adding up over time, and especially as the years go by. You see things in games, and you watch film, and even if there wasn't an injury, sometimes it's a matter of inches that an innocent play gone horribly wrong, or the other way. And especially when it comes to concussions, that's something that is very real, and happens almost every single game. And it's not something that I think, even still now, that we talk about the effects, because football is a tough sport. It's a tough sport to survive in. Every single week you're fighting for your job, and the moment that a door opens for someone else, you don't know if that's your door closing. And that's how I kind of got my start, was an injury. And then all of a sudden, there I was as the starter, and the other guy was kind of left behind a little bit. So it's very difficult. And concussions, they don't help. It affects your brain. And I definitely went through that as a player, and still deal with the after effects now that my career is over. And that's something that I think you have to recognize in yourself when there is a change, when there is things that you're dealing with. And just trying to play the tough guy or tough girl, and pass it off as just part of the sport, I don't think is the right thing to do. And I think it is important to do that. And I am doing that now, which is funny, because the message is different than kind of what I went through. And I just was always scared of losing my job, and wanting to be this type of player that I thought my role was in this. You'd be available every week, no matter what you're going through. Just get yourself ready for the next game. And that comes at a price. But the good thing is that now, I'm doing everything I can to try and help, I guess, the after effects of all the stuff that I've experienced and the injuries. And but the biggest thing that I think you can't see is mentally in your brain. And I think that's something that you definitely have to always be in communication with yourself with, and with other people around you. I was very lucky to have a very supportive wife and family that I was able to talk about, exactly what I was feeling during the lows of the lows that I experienced in my career from injuries. And it's the people around you that really help get you through and bring you out, and realize that there is another side to it. And so I'm very fortunate for that. But they're definitely, what you see as fans on the surface is all great, but there definitely is a lot more behind the scenes as a player, for sure.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about you leaning on your wife as support. And last year's message at our Friday Night Lights was, who would you talk to? Who would you talk to in your time of crisis, in your time of need? And so I think you really nailed it there. And the other thing that I really take from that, Brad, is for years all we talked about was the physical demands, and preparing physically for particularly contact sports. And it's really encouraging now that we hear people talking, and athletes talking about the mental side more and more, and not hiding it like it was done years ago. And so I thank you for bringing that up. Tara, you talked earlier about your meditation regimen, and I understand you have a podcast called Meditation for People Who Can't Sit Still. That would be me, by the way.
Everybody.
Is this one of those things you do for you? Because that's our message this year. What do you do for you? What do you do for your own mental well-being? Is this one of the things you do? And if so, how do you stay disciplined to that? And what are some of the other things that you do for you?
Well, that was an Instagram live show that I was doing weekly at the very beginning of the pandemic, and it dropped off after a few months. But I think it was at a time when I certainly needed to dig into my own meditation practice. There was so much uncertainty, so much fear. And so it was a really nice journey I was able to take with people who wanted to join me on Instagram, whether I knew them or not. Yeah, I grew up in a household where my family was made up of practicing Buddhists. So I was taught how to meditate at a young age. Not that I really did it in earnest, but when I was in my early 20s, I started to take it on as a personal practice. And I still have to remind myself to do it. I mean, it's great when you're in a crisis mode, but it's actually much better if you do it regularly every day, because then maybe you can actually avert that crisis mode, because it really is about touching in with the earth, touching in with yourself, touching in with your breath. And maybe, making helping your mind not be so reactive to situations. So certainly meditation is something that I try to do regularly, and I certainly turn to during times of chaos. And I mean, I cull, like, I think many of us, I cull things from various places in my life. I've had lots of discussions with psychologists and mental health professionals about things that can work for me. It's interesting to hear Brad talk about the insecurities that he has. I don't want to say battled, because it's not really a battle. At a certain point, you have to give in and just go along for the ride. But that had accompanied his career. And I mean, it's the same for all of us, and certainly the same for me. I certainly battled nerves for the entirety of my life and career. So, sometimes it's little things. Sometimes I have to make a conscious effort to make the positive voice in my head louder than the negative voice in my head. And that's an actual practice. That's something that I have to do. Before I go on stage or go on the air, I make sure that I do take a little beat and a deep breath. Michael Landsberg gave me some advice early in my career, and he said, don't forget to smile. And it wasn't one of those patronizing, like, make sure you smile, look real pretty, girl. It's like, that's like one of the things that starts to go when your nerves kick in is your sense of humor. So it's actually good to just kind of light up your face. And some advice I got from a psychologist, and what's really natural to me, is actually when I start to feel some panic or nerves kick in, I sing. He said a lot of this is a guy who works with a lot of NHL teams. He said a lot of goaltenders he knows, actually, they do a little bit of singing when they're in their crease getting ready. So I take a lot of things from a lot of places, but I think just creating space whenever you can, taking that beat before you react, or before the lights come on, that's one of the most important things to me.
Well, great advice. Except I think my wife would probably suggest I don't take on the singing one. That wouldn't go so well around
You
here.
can keep the volume really low. Just there's something about the vibration in your throat and the back of your mouth. It's actually really good for you.
She may argue with that. Brad, Brad, you've retired from the game now, and I can imagine that was a very difficult decision. And I'm sure there's days where you wish you were back, probably on game days when you're watching it. And I'm sure there's days where you are quite happy that you're not there, taking the brunt of the attack out on the football field. But either way, that mental volume of your feelings. Between, did I do the right thing? I really would like to be back, and I like this next stage of my life. How do you control that, and what do you do for you? What does Brad Sinopoli do for him, for his mental wellness?
Yeah, it's very interesting, the volleying back and forth, like you mentioned. I have recently kind of discovered it's not too far off from what you experience as a player, in terms of, did I do the right thing? Was that the correct, or should I have done this? Do I have regret with this? As a player, you learn to live without regrets, because no matter what, you can try your hardest. You're not going to turn back time and redo that play that was a disaster. It just happened, and you chose what you chose to do on the field, and you reacted how you reacted, and you just have to live with it and move on. And that's kind of similar to, I think, this scenario. I have a little bit more choice here because I'm choosing to end, but I definitely have those feelings. It's hard to, I think, get the competitive side um, out of your body. I feel that to this very second, in terms of who's still playing, and I want to be better than them. I want to do this and that. I don't think that part of me is going to leave, just because I think that's just so ingrained over the many, many years. On the other side, there is a point, I think, when you're choosing to step away from the game that you have to make as a player. And if you're not going to make it, it's going to be made for you. And I just think that that was something that I wanted to be in control of. And I think as athletes, sometimes a lot of stuff actually, most of the time, is out of your control. And you can only control this small little bit. And so I think I controlled that. And I also am learning that, your emotions that go along with it, obviously you can control. And I should say that you have to put work in to control that. And I do that many different ways. I did it as a player. Tara talked about singing. I used to hum before games. I used to get extremely nervous on kickoffs. And when the first contact happened, I'm admitting now, I always felt like, I'd look around and be like, what are we doing here? Like, that was a crazy collision. Like, we're actually going to go out and play this game. I battled that up until the 20 seconds before the first play of the game. And then, I'm just running around like I've never thought about that. And I used to hum. I used to hum a lot of Queen for whatever reason. It just kind of always popped in my head. Bohemian Rhapsody. I would hum it, and Tara's right. There's some soothing thing about the vibrations that just kind of calms you down. And okay, we can go out and we can do this thing. So you do find a lot of little things that I think, work for you as an individual. Nowadays I just take things that I love. I love music. I'm not great at all in terms of playing the guitar, but I play the guitar, and it just brings me to a different place. There's a different challenge. There's different rewards that are just different than what I'm used to. I love to be outdoors. I love fishing. So that's kind of the place that I go to that allows me to kind of think, kind of reason, I guess, with myself. If I am dealing with something, or if I'm having a bad day, if I'm kind of feeling a little bit low, missing football, and just feeling a different, you kind of lose an identity. I think that's tough it doesn't just happen overnight that you get over that and find yourself the next day. So that's an ongoing thing that I'm dealing with. And I just try to find the things that I love and embrace those. And that's how football worked out for me. Was I was doing something I loved, and something really good came from that. And I just think that, moving forward in my life, the focus is just be around what you love, and you never know where it's going to take you, and just stay at it and enjoy it and go from there.
Well, I really appreciate the information that you've both brought forward tonight. Just a wealth of information that can help mental health. And I have one question left, and it's for the both of you, and I'll give you both a chance to kind of just sum it up in maybe one sentence. But we have a number of Peterborough High School students watching this video right now, and they more than us older adults have had to deal with the restrictions of COVID in this pandemic far more than anyone else, particularly with isolation, being away from their friends, the sports, the parties, all the things that are important to young people. And although some of those restrictions are being lifted, I'm not sure that we'll ever get back to exactly the way we had it before, pre-pandemic time. So what would your advice be to those high school students out of everything that you said tonight? And there's been a lot of great information. Could you sum it up maybe with one piece of advice that they should take forward to help their mental wellness? Tara?
Oh, that's a hard one. As I look up the stairs, my 12-year-old's up there, and it's not easy. It has sucked, and it has sucked for all of us, but I really think it has sucked for young people. I'm not sure I touched on this, but I would say, the world is so chaotic right now, and everything feels so manic around all of us. I really think the key here is kindness, and compassion. And I know it sounds hokey, but I think it's true. And I think it's having kindness and patience and compassion towards others. But I think most of all, it's also having those same things towards yourself. I think we're all very hard on ourselves, and I think it's okay to acknowledge when we're not doing well, and we should feel free and open to say that, to talk to somebody, tell your friends, tell your parents, but be kind and gentle to yourself through all of this. Life is hard enough, and COVID has made it so much harder. So just approach everything, I think, with some gentleness.
Incredible advice, and take it from someone who, myself and my family needed that a number of years ago with a loss that we had with with our 55, and we felt that from the community. And I think you're absolutely right that we need some gentleness, some kindness, and some support. Everybody get together because we've been apart for so long. Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, I just want to say that was a great advice by Tara. I think I was thinking something very similar, but I think to kind of piggyback off that is, things will happen, and using what Tara said, I think embracing what is happening and having that compassion with yourself and love, and I think life is cyclical. With everything that happens, there's always ups and downs, no matter what you're doing, whether you're a musician, whether you're an athlete. It doesn't matter whether you're just doing something for fun. There's going to be a really, really good day where everything is going to go your way, and the next day it's might be the opposite. And I think just understanding that those cycles can happen, and it's about kind of embracing that cycle and embracing the up and down. I think that is so great about life and about anything that we any journey that we go on. It's that up and down that I think is the unique experience. So just that basically is my message. Is I think is as you're going through these things, just take time to realize that when it's good, don't live on that, and when it's bad, it will get better. And that's the beauty in everything we do. Is it's kind of a struggle, and that's what makes the good times so great, though, when you pull through and persevere through everything.
Absolutely. It's the challenges that make us. I want to thank you both dearly for participating in this interview and being part of our Team 55 Friday Night Lights 9th annual. I know, Brad, we've been bugging you for years, and you're always at practice or games. I'm really glad that you could join us. And Tara, I'm thrilled that Michael introduced me. Our friend Michael Landsberg introduced us, and you were able to join us. Your inspiring careers, your insight on what it takes to navigate the mental health challenges that getting through those careers and those career changes and those successes will no doubt motivate those who are watching. So thank you very much. And thank you to all who tuned in to this show. We appreciate everyone's support. We truly hope that we've helped to inspire you to identify what you can do for your own mental wellness. So I ask you today, what can you do for you? Thank you very much.